you'll be able to do in a self-serve mode, right? Using agents that can describe the work, and then you can actually perform the work in the system itself. So I think it makes the ERP, as a lot of people are calling it, much more, the vocabulary that's being used is much more systems of actions above and beyond systems of record. And then the most foundational element we think of AI actually is if AI can help build new features and honestly entirely new applications.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, hey everyone. Thank you for joining. And we have one of the most exciting vendor as well as the guest. So Sandeep, I am going to turn it over to you for your quick intro and maybe talk about Everest. I mean, we are super excited with the kind of developments that you guys are doing there in your space.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Sam. It's great to be here. I'm one of the founders. My name is Sandeep. I'm one of the founders of a company called Everest, and it's one of the newer ERP platforms. And we took one thing that's unique about Everest is we took our time. As you know, this is maybe the most venerable category of software there is, and most mission critical category of software there is. And so we took our time to build what we believe is an enterprise oriented next generation ERP platform, and wanted to share a bit more about that today.
Okay, perfect. And again, we want to make this conversation as conversational as possible. So if you have any sort of stories, comments in the audience, please post in the either chat or Q&A. Generally, chat is easier. Q&A goes through a little different process. So if you simply want to post on chat, we'll be covering them. Yeah, Sandeep, so please go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll tell you a little bit about Everest and how we think about the market. So as I mentioned, I am one of the three founders of this company. And from the beginning, our company has been a global company. And we think of the ERP market as a global market as well. And so my co-founders are ex-SAP technology executives. Franz Faber in particular led some of their biggest 1.0 projects as head of development and chief architect, including SAP HANA. And immediately before this, I spent my career almost entirely in Silicon Valley. And most recently before Everest, I spent a number of years at a company called Viva, which is one of the leading cloud and SaaS technologies of the last 20 years, focused more so on the life sciences, pharmaceutical verticals, but building very much like ERP-esque applications.
Yeah.
When I say ERP-esque, I mean mission-critical applications that help run an industry. In the case of Viva, it's applications like manufacturing, clinical trials, regulatory submissions, and so on for the biggest pharmaceutical medical devices companies in the world. What's unique about Everest, the founders, all three of us, come from a deep technology and product background from enterprise software. And as you know, ERP is about how technology and business process work together to solve hard business problems. So we were very aware from the beginning that we needed to partner with really seasoned business and operations professionals. And from our standpoint, the heart of an ERP system is really how accounting at the core and financials work with core business processes at the company. And some of those processes end up being, as you know, industry specific, depending on the use case. Yeah. And so a lot of what we did early on was hire sophisticated professionals with knowledge of deep technical accounting that allowed companies to go public, to become enterprise companies, and get their point of view to shape our product strategy and our product details. So I think you will see that in the product as well. So it's not just a technology foundation, it really is a multinational accounting and operational foundation that's there in the business process level. As I mentioned, we we started in 2020, and we really took our time to build what we believe is the next platform. So we have a global team across a number of locations, and we raised adequate capital upfront to be able to build out the product, so it could be deployed for complex use cases from day one.
Okay, perfect. And again, thank you so much for joining, Sam. Is in the audience. And guys, if you can post your locations as well, we would love to know where you are joining from. We always like to know about our audience. And love Viva, and love your background, Sandeep. So yeah, so keep going. Right now, we don't have any questions or comments. Whatever you want to share.
Absolutely. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I don't want to spend so much time talking about, modules and features and
Yeah.
differentiation. People know all that stuff in the audience really well. I guess what I will say is I think we are being focused from the start on incrementally building out what we believe is a complete ERP. No ERP is ever 100% complete for every use case in every industry, but there are some core foundational elements. So where we started was actually on the top left, right? From the very beginning, from an application and business process standpoint, we looked at what was happening with companies in the last 20 years, right? 20 to 30 years since the core, some of the core ERP providers that had their big deployments. And so what we looked at there was, well, the biggest thing that we think has changed in business process is the way that people sell.
Yeah.
Right? There's been a lot of innovation in how people sell, starting with cloud, then with AWS, and kind of the way that not just subscription models, but then how people deploy and then sell software on the cloud. And then, of course, now the last several years with AI. And these models for business are getting more and more dynamic over time. So from subscription to consumption to outcome-based, now being able to track individual token usage. And we expect that trend, I think, for many industries, not just software and kind of just purely digital industries, but also those trends we see increasingly in other industries as well, in retail, in manufacturing, and others. And so from the beginning, we were focused on building an ERP that was really good at handling these core accounting concepts of how overtime accounting works in subscription and consumption-like products. So built into our offering is native subscription lifecycle management from the start, but not just for simple contracts, for complex contracts as well, one-off contracts as well, and all the complexity that comes in RevRec with that.
So just 1 second, Sandeep. So I'm getting a comment from the audience, and can somebody confirm that everybody is able to hear? And my understanding is that Jeffrey, are you able to hear me? Can you give me thumbs up or no? And maybe it's a problem at your end. Somebody in the audience, can you confirm that you are able to hear both of us, I and Sandeep? Okay. So they are good. Yeah, I mean, that's what I felt. Thanks, guys. Okay, please keep going. And Jeff, please post. I mean, if you are still struggling, maybe just log out and log in. That could fix. Check the audio controls below to make sure that your correct speaker is pointed. Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. Over to you, Sandeep. Sorry.
No worries at all. So, I think that was sort of the original problems that we looked at. For us, obviously, when you do an ERP, the general ledger or the record to report functionality around the general ledger is the very core of any ERP system. It's sort of the prerequisite from a business process standpoint. And so the main decision we made was, though, we wanted to be international from day one. I think part of that just came from, frankly, the setup of the company. We were international company from day one. We had multiple entities from day one of the company, so we had to do it for ourselves as well. But yes, so to being able to do not just multi-entity accounting, right, but to be able to tackle tough requirements around different accounting rules in different countries. As you know, the German chart of account structure typically is not the same as the US chart of account structure.
Yeah.
And so how do you handle intercompany transactions? How do you handle eliminations and CTA and all the Forex impact? That's sort of been built into our platform from day one as well. Procure to pay, I think we started in more digital-centric industries. So, I think at the very beginning, we focused a little bit less on just like procurement and supply chain, but that's been increased area of our investment as time has gone on. HR and people management, right? Our point of view in HR and people management is what does finance operations need from the point of view of people? As you know, for many companies, people are the number one cost
Yeah.
to the company, right? From an expense side. So again, our view of it is we're not building applications for, say, talent management or employee surveys and things like that. So not for the head of HR necessarily, but instead, what do you need to know about people from payroll at the employee level, managing headcount,
Yeah.
being able to plan for headcount, as finance operations and the executive team needs to run the business. And as we've been expanding our applications beyond, call it, core financial applications and the business processes of order to cash and procure to pay, the next set of things we've been doing is in inventory and professional services automation to kind of start to round out this entire ERP suite.
Okay, so we have one question in the audience, and I don't know if you want to cover this, but we have a question from Dan. And Dan, thank you so much for joining. And please, ask more questions. So he's asking, does Everest have manufacturing vertical functionality, or does it focus only on financials? And he's joining from Virginia. My understanding, based on what I have read, and obviously this is my first interaction with you and your team as well. So I'm fairly new to the platform, as well as your company. Sandeep, my understanding is that your primary target market right now is more services, right? Or are you targeting manufacturing as well?
So, our initial target market was software companies who have, as you know, inherently a software as a service kind of model of some kind. We actually do have early adopters that are manufacturing customers as well. And we already have inventory management. But when someone says manufacturing, to me, it's inventory is the start of manufacturing. There's many other applications there, like being able to manage your bills of materials, being able to do potentially demand planning. So I think, yes, it's an area we are investing in and moving toward. I would say we are the foundational element, and we have some early adopters in the manufacturing area.
Okay, perfect. So Dan, I don't know if that answers your question. If you have more follow-up questions, please do. But I think manufacturing gets very complicated. Obviously, each micro vertical is going to have its own nuances. Yeah. So thank you so much for addressing that.
We have, as I mentioned, maybe one other point I could add is, we have other, a lot of times there's across industries, certainly manufacturing is an example, retail is an example, but we have customers that are, call it, financial services customers, but elements of their business model are subscription-like. And what they're looking for is a modern ERP platform to be able to leverage some of the core, not just application capabilities, but as I'll go into in a moment here, some of the modern AI and kind of platform capabilities that we have. And that's another reason why they're partnering with us.
Okay, so we have one more question here. Thank you so much, Jeff. And I believe that now you're able to hear us, which is a good sign. Thank you so much. So Jeff is saying, how easy is it to add additional functionality such as Avalara or other areas that you can tie into the Everest platform? I don't know, what your position is. 90% of, including AI native vendors, I think everybody is aligning with platforms like Avalara, and I don't know if it would make sense to incorporate all of those sales tax functionality as part of the ERP platform. 90% of the mainstream products, they don't do that. So what's your position on that, I guess? How do you approach this?
Yeah, we have a native integration platform that we have built into our ERP. So you can use another integration platform like an iPaaS solution of some kind, but you don't need to have one in order for us to connect. And in addition to the integration platform, we've actually built out out-of-the-box integrations for many of the common third-party solutions out there, and Avalara is one of them, actually. So Avalara is something that we have actually, we're managing the integration for it, and we connect directly to Avalara. There's in fact another sales tax vendor called Anrock that is somewhat popular in the SaaS ecosystem that we also integrate with out of the box.
Okay, perfect. So keep going, I guess. Obviously we want to see the product a little bit if we have time, but keep going with your agenda.
Yep. So, I just wanted to maybe mention a couple more slides and then I'll get into the product here, which is just a little bit of how we think about AI. And I think the future of AI in ERP. And so the way we think of it is in kind of these three buckets, right? Which is one bucket of AI, we think, I think every provider, including us and others, will take on, which is you have this valuable data in the system. How can you turn the data into doing the work that you do more efficiently? That's a bit repetitive at times, right? So can you, for example, when you do the flux analysis on a monthly basis, can you speed up that process? Can you speed up the process of transaction matching, right? Can you make the close more efficient? If you look at it purely from an accounting financial standpoint, but of course, you could apply that same thinking to some of the other functions like inventory as well, right? But we think that again, I think everyone should be doing it in the modern era. If you're building AI-enabled software, this is we from our point of view table stakes.
Yeah.
And so then it gets into what we think is if you look at the longer term view of AI, where is AI really going to change platforms like ERP? And they're basically in two buckets. Essentially, we think agents that people are able to build are going to be able to do things that historically people didn't do in ERP, right? So like but the data is there, so you should take more advantage of it, right? So an example would be where you oftentimes would export the data from an ERP into into a Power BI or an analytical system. You would then write up your requirements. Perhaps you'd work with your IT counterpart and or another person or a consultant, right, to be able to craft these kinds of requests and then be able to build that. I think some of the customizations that you've been doing, you'll be able to do in a self-serve mode, right? Using agents that can describe the work, and then you can actually perform the work in the system itself. So I think it makes the ERP, as a lot of people are calling it, much more, the vocabulary that's being used is much more systems of actions above and beyond systems of record. And then the most foundational element we think of AI actually is if AI can help build new features and honestly entirely new applications, right? So it is an application development platform too, right? No matter what we do as a company, we can never, especially as companies get more and more complex, we cannot meet all the features, all the needs. It's not possible. There's just so many permutations to your business. You're going to need something that we have not anticipated. And then the way to be more successful from our standpoint is to be able to give you tools that we can help you implement using our services teams, or your teams can implement, and with consulting teams, to be able to build new capabilities faster. And these are just examples, right? They could be industry-specific applications. It could be a custom coding process that you have. We can't anticipate all the use cases. However, if we give you a next generation, and we think enterprise class ERP platform, you'll be able to use the SDLC that's in our products to be able to describe new features and applications. All right, I'm going to keep going here unless there's questions.
No, there are no more questions. Please keep going.
Okay. All right. And so, what is just speaking a little bit about the platform, we spoke about some of the applications, and I won't go into that detail here since we briefly mentioned it earlier, but what are some of the core capabilities we believe of our platform that we think are unique, kind of in this world where we want to be able to build capabilities faster, especially using AI? And so I'll just highlight two. I think that some of them are probably very familiar to you, like having a consistent data model is, the foundation of having a good ERP system, right? So I won't talk about those things here. I'll talk about two other things, which is a technology that we've invented called live sandboxing, which is, as I'm sure your audience is familiar, like, and people know, sandboxing has been around ever since business systems have been around, but it's the way in which we do sandboxing that's quite different. Historically, as you know, sandboxes are replicas of your production environments, and there's lots of rules and regulations that govern how sandboxes work. So for example, you may not want to have production data in there, you want to isolate it, et cetera, et cetera. So we've taken all of the work of sandbox management, right? Cloning the sandbox, making the changes, transporting or updating the changes from sandbox to test to QA to production. That entire business process, if you will, or development process of managing sandboxes, we have completely redone. And we do sandbox management entirely inside production, right? And that's the key innovation, is by doing it inside production, but still having it be secure and isolated, we believe we can move your business much faster and much more agile than before because it just takes you less time to manage all the changes. And obviously, as you know, change management is where a lot of time and effort goes in managing these systems. So I'll
So
showcase. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, so just one question there. So I guess, is it fair to say, or maybe the comparison that I'm drawing here is probably with either Snowflake or Databricks. I think they did very similar things, and their approach was that, hey, they didn't want to move the real data and schema, and they could still replicate the same performance. That was not possible before these platforms. Is that similar mindset technology, or is it different?
I think there's similar concepts. I think the main difference is, the ERP is your transactional system of record.
Yeah.
So the main technical differences is you're actually dealing with transactional data changes, right? So let me give you a simple example, right? Like if you're like in your sandbox, you're trying to go execute a payment against an invoice as an
Yeah.
example, right?
Yeah.
Like, should that be allowed in a sandbox or not? But more importantly, what the question becomes when you're going to transport the data from the sandbox to production, it's not just like you're merging data, just like you merge code. You actually
Yeah.
have to understand, is that transaction actually legitimate for your business at that particular point in time or not? So you have to be able to essentially play as if that transaction was happening in real time. Now, the way we do it behind the scenes is we the way the sandboxes actually work is, we are not deep copying all the tables. We are basically, it's an insert only system, and we're basically doing a copy on write. And so as you're making changes, we are like you're tracking changes in a document, in an Excel file or a Google document.
Yeah.
Similarly, in an ERP way, we are tracking all the changes that you're making because everything is versioned inside the system.
Yeah. So we have one question here, from Dan again, and thank you so much, Dan, for asking that. And he's asking about the CMMC regulation, from the government perspective, and that is prevalent in the defense and aerospace space. I don't know if you really want to attack that target market. Obviously, guys, you need to go a little easy, I guess, on these guys. They have barely been in the market. They're moving at a light speed. So obviously, I don't know, how much functionality they are going to have right away, but it's commendable what they have done and what they are able to provide. So Sandeep, I'll let you answer that. I mean, I don't want to speak for you.
Well, I think, I have actually served in the past aerospace and defense customers in a different company in the ERP market. So, there's requirements around, I would think, export control and so on. So currently, no, we're not focused on the aerospace and defense market at this point in time. I think that the platform we built will allow us to do that, but there's some specific requirements we'd have to meet in order to actually, meet the needs of that market.
Yeah, and hopefully, Jan, that answers your question. So Sandeep, go ahead, please.
Yep.
Control over to you. Yeah.
So I talked a little bit about sandboxing, and I'll talk a little bit about AI Specification Manager, and I'll go into the demo here in a moment, which is AI Specification Manager is basically a new way. If sandboxing is a way of being able to test and publish any changes in the system, right? So if you think about the software development lifecycle, right, it's still kind of the core principles are the same, right? You start with defining your requirements, making code changes, testing those changes, and then publishing those changes in a safe way, right? So sandboxing really helps a lot with the back half of the process, right? It's about testing scenarios, doing testing in the system with real production data in a safe, isolated way, and then publishing the changes, because that's what sandboxes are used for. AI Specification Manager is about the front end of the process. It's how do you actually build requirements and implement features faster that are tested in live sandboxes. So these two things work really hand in hand from our standpoint to really do the entire kind of AI native SDLC inside of an ERP system.
Okay.
All right. So with all that said, I'm going to maybe step out of slides here and go and show you a little bit of the product, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, please. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we have a lot of ERP experts in the audience. If you have any specific ERP questions, obviously terms such as live sandboxing, as well as AI specification manager, are probably going to be fairly new to the ERP community, to be completely honest. Sandeep. So obviously we need to know a little bit more about the new ways of doing things, how the new world is going to be. So the more you can show, obviously these guys are going to feel a little easier.
Okay, of course. Yeah. Let me just go flip over here in a second.
Yeah. Yeah, and I could see very detailed functionality there in the product, and that's what I was talking about, Lightspeed. And I guess you are probably among the top four vendors, and I don't know whether you like to see yourself that way. Obviously, everybody would like to be number one, but you are probably the top four, as far as my understanding goes. We have one comment here, and Sandeep, if you need more time, you can do that. I'm going to read this comment. So this is coming from Meherban, and thank you so much for joining, Meherban. And he's saying, Sandeep, before deciding on a software solution and engaging your services, would you recommend that organizations first think through and document their current state core business processes, including process level pain points, opportunities, and risks, so they can define at a high level what their future state process should look like to support business objectives and long-term strategy that would help them articulate cleaner business requirements for you and improve engagement and change management and around end user adoption of the software? That's a very long question and comment. Thank you so much for doing that. My understanding of this comment will be that regardless of whichever software you are using, that's probably going to be given. These things you have to do. This is called prep work, and I don't think with AI systems that is optional. So, Sandeep, what is your take on that, I guess?
Yeah, I think two-part take. I think, first of all, I don't think AI changes the need for you to like how well, the better you understand your business, the better you understand your why and your processes, the better you're able to articulate what potentially you would want the AI to drive out or any vendor to drive out from there. So I think that's 100% true. I think, what we often see with the customers we partner with is we actually do help them with that journey, right? So I think part of what can help in a system like this is if you have taken the time to build out these complicated processes around subscription management, multi-entity, international consolidation, some of the, call it, leading practices are already baked into the software. And so your software vendor can, as part of the implementation cycle, and that's what we end up doing, is asking customers about their as-is processes and being able to describe, here we think is potentially a better way to be able to run your business. Because ultimately, I think, you don't want to put an ERP in place and not transform your business. That would not be,
Yeah.
the payoff would not be there. So I think the answer is certainly yes. And I do think it's still, the AI the more you know your business, the better the AI driven requirements will actually perform.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. And hopefully, Marwan, that answers your question. If you have any follow-up questions, we are here to help you. All right, Sandeep. So yeah, we are excited to see the product, man. This looks cool. And I
All
think we
right.
have
So
validation from the audience as well. They're loving it.
all right, so there's a lot here, right? So we're not going to cover this all in 30 minutes, but there really is all those applications I described, from all those operational reports and RevRec to managing cloud and subscription costs natively in the system, right? If you're a modern business, and oftentimes for lots of digital businesses, cloud and subscription management is cost number two after people on the expense line. Core banking integrations, order to cash, quote to cash, right? Managing sophisticated products in your product catalog, managing invoicing, 606 RevRec, and so on, procure to pay, core accounting, and I keep going here, and so on. And so people management and so on. So what I wanted to jump to, though, instead of going through every feature of the product here, is I wanted to talk a little bit about, to have fun with this sandboxing concept and to show you what the power of this concept really is and why it matters so much to, I think, the future of ERP itself. So to kind of show you what I mean by that, I'm going to go into record to report, and I'm just in this tenant, right? And I'm going to show you what entities I have. So I've got a multi-entity system. Hopefully, everyone can see that. And I've got
Yeah.
multiple entities where the US entity is the parent entity, and you've got a number of entities around the world. And what I wanted to show you is just, classically what happens at any of these companies is, as you go international, your accounting gets more and more complex. And so, the German entity, for example, has an entirely different chart of accounts than the US entity. The US entity chart of accounts is being used, in countries that are closer to US GAAP. So UK, for example, but the German requirements are quite different. Similarly, there could be different fiscal calendars in the system as well, right, for different entities, and you have to kind of consolidate your financials across all those. So that's pretty foundational ERP. What I wanted to show you was how the sandboxing capability is different. So the first thing you'll notice is in this top right, we've got and you can see the number here. Inside of
Yeah.
one tenant, we've got 7,343 sandboxes, right? That is different, right? Like to give you an example, at Viva, we had at the time that I was there, we had well over 1,000 customers and maybe about 10,000 sandboxes across all customers at
Yeah.
that particular point in time, right? In Everest, you can create 10,000 sandboxes in one application tenant, right? And that power lets you run your business, we believe, differently. So to give you an example of that, I'm going to go enter this sandbox that we created just for this little demo here. And what you'll notice here in the sandbox is, as soon as I enter this sandbox, I have added another entity, right? So what am I trying to do here? I didn't have Singapore outside of the sandbox. What I'm trying to do is imagine I'm trying to acquire a company that happens to be in Singapore. I am basically simulating what that would look like in my system if I were to acquire a Singapore-based entity. I can do all of the chart of account setup. I can do the fiscal calendar management. I can bring the journal entries in if I wanted to. I can even consolidate, right? Without really doing a lot of extra effort. It's all possible because you can do all these kinds of scenarios inside the system, right? And it's not just creating an entity, right? If I go into the details of this sandbox, what this sandbox and what's happening here in real time is the system is calculating all of the differences between what's in this sandbox and what's in the main system, meaning the production system, right? This is my analogy earlier is it's the version differences between all the changes that you've made in the sandbox. And I won't go through all of them here. All I want to show you is, wow, it's a lot, right? Because you're simulating a whole acquisition. So you're creating entities, you're creating invoice policies, you're managing account groupings, depreciation, right? You're simulating the whole acquisition inside of a system without a lot of effort.
So I have some questions there, if you don't mind.
Please.
So generally, the process that you are describing, that happens in the FP&A system, and FP&A is a very different category than ERP. The role was different traditionally, right? Now, do you see this as a merge? Do you see yourself as more of the FP&A system, or do you see yourself as more of the ERP system? And I'll tell you my reasoning why I feel it that way and why the community feels that way, right? You have your core transactions. When you are doing your forecasting, you are doing your future analysis, you are doing your conditional analysis is probably the term, right? You don't have to shake your foundation because that has not happened yet. Okay, you don't have to shake your core transaction. So do you see the merge of these two categories, or how do you see yourself positioned between ERP and FP&A?
Well, I think it's going to lead to, a more consolidated system. And I think we think better FP&A capabilities, right? Because imagine to do something like this, you're going to have to get all the data from your ERP, all the data from this new acquisition. Your FP&A is not going to have all the transactional rules of your accounting and depreciation and all this consolidation, right? So I think either you're going to take all this data, integrate it, merge it inside your FP&A tool, or you can run the simulation inside your ERP in a much more straightforward way. So I think from our point of view, it just gives your ERP the ability to be able to do planning, forecasting type of activities, just kind of out of the box, but in a secure, isolated way, right? The reason why we think ERP systems did not do this in the past was because it was the system of record, right? Like you would not take chances with your system of record, right? But actually what sandboxing and live sandboxing in particular is letting you do is it's letting you take chances, right? Because it's safe and isolated, right? If I leave this sandbox with a click of a button, and I'm now back in my ERP system, right?
Yeah.
That entity doesn't exist. It's as simple as that, right? Like, so it never happened. It's all isolated, but I have the whole power of the ERP to do what if.
Yeah, so great response there. And I think we have one comment, and I'm going to have probably one more follow-up question, from my understanding. So Sam is asking, okay, what size of company is the system aimed at? Maybe you can talk about the previous logos that you have, where you have had successes, where it is adopted, and maybe, talk about the size of the companies as well.
Yep. Yeah, so we've been selling for a little bit over a year now, and so you just go through the journey where you start with we're starting with mid-market customers,
Yeah,
right? So 10 million revenue to a couple hundred million in revenue, and then
yeah,
we're getting to larger and larger customers now. So we have customers in that range, already successful, replacing multiple processes that they have, right? So replacing their core GL, obviously, that's always a part of the deployment because that's the foundation, but also the order to cash process, parts of their payables and integrated payroll processes, for example. And now we're taking the larger and larger customers as well. I will say, to be honest with you, like what we're finding is the people that are gravitating to our solution have enterprise kind of requirements because ours is a more enterprise oriented system.
yeah.
So, it's about really getting more and more complex customers referenceable. The product changes, but the product changes are relatively small compared to you have to get the customers live, get them referenceable, and then they're happy they can recommend to their friends.
Yeah. So, Sam, I don't know if that answers your question. If you have any follow-up question, please comment. So I'm going to have one more follow-up question there in terms of the chart of account scheme, I guess. So I was personally reviewing and I'm trying to understand this magic because I don't understand, to be completely honest. Things seem very magical here that you are able to do all of that. And I don't think the AI native community has done a very good job of explaining how this magic is happening. And that's where I guess, we would want as the consultants, we want innovation, but we want to understand, what is happening behind innovation and from the technology standpoint, right? So one of the things that I was reviewing, in one of your competitors, and they are again one of the top. They are very well highlighted, and obviously they are claiming very fast implementation, etc., which is kind of unbelievable. You have seen my post on LinkedIn, right? So one of the things that I've noticed, and this is the philosophy that is very prevalent in Silicon Valley, when I was talking to a lot of different investors as well, they all are going after the success of platforms such as Notion, Smartsheet. Rippling is probably one of the most highlighted, platform there. And one of the challenges that we run into is that they have bypassed a lot of data rules and data layers. And I don't know if you had to do that as well to enable this magic. So now if I look at the APIs of those platforms, they have bypassed the complete chart of account scheme, which is slightly uncomfortable for traditional ERP consultants. You can call us legacy if you like, because we are not wired to think that way. But what that does is it provides the foundation, the accounting foundation that was must. So maybe talk about your chart of account structure, how you are able to enable this magic where you are able to transfer all of that data, because traditional ERP systems, they will not be able to do that because you are going to have at least million rules and you cannot create these snapshots so quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sandboxing capability, I believe, at least to my knowledge, is very unique to Everest. I don't think any older provider or any newer provider that I have seen has this capability at all. They're still doing sandboxing in a very traditional way, not the live sandboxes that I'm talking about. But I think now back to your question about data integration, data migration, and implementation. So I think there's a fundamental difference between a pure data migration and a process migration, right? I think people that know ERP have known this, I think, forever. So I don't think the fundamentals have changed, right? If you want to just migrate journal entries from one system to another, right? That shouldn't take just migrating journal entries alone. That is not necessarily a massively time-consuming activity because there are not a lot of judgments you're having to make about the business and how it needs to operate. You can claim that can happen in 24 hours or 5 days. It's a small amount of time, and we have done projects even at Everest, that are like GL based that we have completed from start to finish, including the migration in 4 to 6 weeks. However, that is not, I would say, representative of most ERP projects, because I think most ERP projects require, going back to the question the gentleman asked earlier, which is the whole point of you doing an ERP change is not to transport journal entries. There's not that much more benefit to your business. You have to think about what is the business benefit. Like, are you going to change your order to cash process? Are you going to be able to acquire companies faster? Would that require you to have a different charts of account structure, right? And so those are business decisions, not just software decisions, right? And those business decisions will take some time, right? They cannot all just be AI generated because you'll get your business wrong that way. So I think what we find is the more business transformation is happening in a project, and again, I think most ERPs really are about business transformation,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
more you need to think about that decision-making process, and it needs to be human discussed and of course modeled in software. Software, of course, can help some, and I think things like live sandboxing help make those changes faster, but people still have to come to an agreement. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So I'm going to have some more follow-up comments there, and hopefully you can provide some insights. So let's do a walkthrough of this process, live sandboxing, the way you are doing. I understand. I have a little bit understanding of LLM. I would not say that I understand them well, but as a lay user, I would say, what I can do is I can create code, which is the power, I guess, from the AI perspective, and that's what you are able to leverage. That's why you are able to create such a detailed product overnight, and you are able to compete with vendors that probably have invested $1 billion in their product development to get here, right? So now let's walk through the process. So let's say if you are creating your live sandbox from the traditional software development perspective, the way the process is going to be, hey, you are going to have a bunch of SQL scripts in the background. Now, whether AI creates those SQL scripts or you create, that's irrelevant, but you are still executing all of those SQL scripts. So now if you're replicating the whole database from the ERP perspective, I don't know what is the size of this database that you just replicated. Maybe it's very small, so it didn't take as long. Maybe it's designed for that.
It's pretty,
right?
the number of tables can be pretty big, yes.
Right. So number of tables can be, now if you have to execute all of those queries, then you are going to take some time. Okay. And generally, if you talk about the nestedness of ERP database, it takes forever. And sometimes the rules are so interdependent that it's almost impossible to do the same thing that you are doing. So now you have two options. Okay. Either you can cut down on those rules, and that's exactly what systems such as your Notion or a Smartsheet, or the only reason why they are able to do all of that is because they have bypassed all of those database rules. And and that's what I am personally noticing with a lot of other AI native platforms. So is that what is happening from the technology perspective, or is it similar to Snowflake or Databricks, the way they had enabled, because they had a real technology innovation and they had claimed that, hey, I'm cutting down ETL, which sort of made sense how they were doing because you didn't have to. So explain the technology a little bit more, I guess, what is happening in the background from the AI native perspective.
Yeah, I think you just have to go back to, I think, the point that you made. Like, are you trying to build a transactional system of record? And I think by definition, a transactional system of record is going to have business rules. And you have to guarantee the integrity and the consistency of the transactions. If you're not able to do that, why would people run their processes on you, right? Then they can analyze data, but they can't run your processes on your system. So I would say that part of the fundamentals of, like, you still need transactional consistency, that has not changed, right? So even when I go back to the sandboxing concept I just mentioned earlier, right? I think the cloud and the native AI architecture allows us to have, thousands and thousands of tables in every tenant, right? And I think that cloud scale is giving us, but you still cannot bypass the transactional consistency, right? The reason why the sandboxes are architected the way they are here is because when you are tracking all these changes, like this entity I created, the invoice configurations I created, the depreciation rules I created, right? When I go merge those changes from the sandbox to the production system, just like you do in ERP today, I have to guarantee that consistency. If I don't, people will not use this because you are not sure how your new version of your system, your production system, will inherit all those rules. You need the consistency, otherwise your sandbox rules are different than your production rules. So I think in order to do that, we actually have to be able to play from a transactional consistency standpoint. We have to be able to play all the transactions that happen in the sandbox and replay them in the production system. And it does take, if your rules are very complicated, it will take a little bit of time. We will have to run through the rules. Otherwise, it's not a consistent system. And I don't think it'll be your ERP system going forward. Again, it may be a repository of data. That's fine, right? but in your Databricks and Snowflake examples are great there because those are ultimately analytical systems. They're analytical
Exactly.
systems. They are not in their core transactional systems. So for them, it's fine because you're not running your core transactions there. And so, but we cannot make that trade-off, otherwise it won't work. Now I'll talk about I hope that point was clear. But point number two about the ETL, I think the ETL as well and how you apply it in a system like ours is quite different. Now, what we are concerned about in ETL is the ERP problems of ETL, which is when you bring third-party data into an ERP, right? You're basically taking data that's coming from a non-system of record potentially. So dirty data may not be perfect, and you somehow have to go through the process of making it ERP ready because it's going to drive your financials, right? So again, unlike those other systems, like if you're doing ETL in these other systems, you're not as concerned about data quality, data integrity, right? You are like importing data, trying to do things like quote unquote zero copy, if you want to call it that. Running a lot of analysis. Again, for their purpose, perfectly fine, right? But for our purpose, we can't say, let me get bills from a different system, post journal entries, but I don't care about the quality of the journal entries. You can't do that because it's your system of record. So we have to go through a process inside our own platform that we actually stage the data. We don't just bring it into production. Our ETL, we actually stage the data and we then map it so you can make financial transactions. And sometimes the data is not correct. So guess what? You just hold it in staging so that you don't create the financial transactions yet until someone approves it or changes the transactional values. And all those versions are again tracked in our system. So you don't really create transactions until you're absolutely ready.
Amazing. Thank you so much for answering that. And in the audience, if you have more questions, please keep them coming. So Sandeep, whatever else you have to show, I guess, we would love to see chart of accounts. We'd love to see, some other master data elements, how they are structured, I guess, in your system.
Yep. So I could talk to you about the account structure. So for example, as I mentioned here, I'll show you a little bit of accounting, and maybe I'll show you a little bit of how applications are built, if that's okay. So this is an example, the German entity, and I'm just showing that because what I'm trying to show you here is in our chart of account structure, you can have different structures entirely, right? So in this particular case, what I'm trying to show is, the chart of account structure, for example, is 4 digits. It's got this one level of hierarchy. But if you're very curious about how this chart of account structure works on the intercompany side, you can see those intercompany settings here, right? So you can see if you're making intercompany transactions or cost plus transactions, how the data is flowing across the German chart of accounts and the parent chart of accounts in this case. Similarly, if you wanted to check out your offset accounts, so if you wanted to see, well, how do vendor bills flow across my German chart of accounts and my call it my GAAP chart of accounts, you can see all those mappings there. And then this is what, by the way, helps us do all of the intercompany eliminations and things like that, just more easily, if you will. What I wanted to, unless you have another question for me, what I wanted to show you a little bit, I can go deeper and deeper on the accounting side, but I wanted to show you a little bit about what we're doing in the future with some of the AI technology that we built and how applications are being built, we think, going forward. And this is this thing I called AI Specify, if you remember from the slides themselves. And so I want to kind of go there and show you what we're up to over there. So what AI Specify is, as I mentioned, sandboxing is about testing, simulating, scenarios, and then merging those changes in a safe transactional way in the system, right? But AI Specify is the front end of that process. It's basically saying, how can if I know what application use cases I want, back to like, if you know what your current state is and where you're trying to go, right? How can you get a system to help you build faster, right? And if I click into this, so this is just, this is not a production ready application. It's just to give you an idea of what's really happening, right? I'm basically trying, let's just say, to build a software procurement system that's a custom one that is operating in the Asia market, for example. What this system is allowing me to do is, instead of writing all my documents in Google Documents or Word documents, all the requirements, it's basically simulating all those hard things that people do inside of an ERP system, right? It's allowing me to, for example, come up with the specifications, the requirements, and the prototypes inside the ERP system. So what are some high-level requirements? I mean, you probably know, I mean, everyone knows what the high-level requirements in this group are. I don't need to go through them about, three-way matching and invoicing matching reconciliation, being able to generate purchase orders, being able to support currency requirements, and so on. And there's some requirements on the front end, the back end, security requirements, and so on, right? Again, the main point I'm making here is these are all AI-generated requirements. No one is claiming they're 100% perfect, but they make you much more productive because they help you get to the output faster, right? What's the secret sauce, though, of course, is we really break down these requirements in full detail, right? So you're able to, with the help of AI, generate the user stories, the user flows, the persona definitions, the design specs, the data models, right? All the kind of subcomponents, if you will, that are functional in nature that help you define ultimately what gets written into the code and ultimately into the SQL that you described earlier, right?
Yeah.
And so again, all this is being AI generated, not claiming it's 100% correct, but it is more productivity, right? If you're able to get to these definitions faster, you're able to then get to prototypes, first versions, next versions faster of your software, right? So this entire SDLC, from requirements to specs to ultimately UI prototypes, all of that is being managed inside the system itself, right? And it's all being generated using the underlying platform, meaning the APIs that allow you to build customers, orders, bills, do all the ERP things in the system.
No, not questions from my side, but audience, if you have any questions, we just have 6 minutes right now. This could be your final opportunity to ask any questions. Thank you so much, Sandeep, for doing an amazing job here.
All right, so I kind of showed you a little bit of where we think AI is going in terms of new apps development. Maybe I wanted to go the other way if I can for a moment here and to show you, we talked a lot about where our focus was and where we focused early on subscription management and handling complicated order to cash use cases, both for software companies and for other industries as well. So if it's okay, I'll just show you a quick preview of what that looks like in the system.
Yeah, so we do have some questions. I mean, I just noticed that. Yeah, so let's answer those first. So we have one question from Brent, and Brent is asking, okay, how sophisticated does the user base need to be? And I'll add some more context to that question because I have those questions as well. So Brent, I don't know where the context is of the question. Maybe you want to clarify that a little bit. But from my perspective, Sandeep, when I look at users have different personas. Some companies have a little bit higher IT maturity. They have done a lot more development. Some companies are not going to have as much maturity, right? So from your perspective, what do you like to see in your ideal customer? Okay, do they need to have any sort of development background? Because the process that you are trying to explain, obviously it's deeply technical. That's not how 90% of the ERP consultants are, because they are very, very, very business savvy, I would say, right? They don't have as much software development background. So what do you like to see in your ideal user, I guess?
Yeah, I would say, look, there's, as you know, there's the side of ERP that is like running the system and configuring the system. And then there's a side of ERP that's like building the new things that tie with the rest of the system. So what I just showed you with AI Specify, that was, that's obviously going to require ultimately some sort of knowledge of code, right? Like it's there to speed up application development, but it requires some knowledge of code, right? However, a lot of what you're doing in the system as an end user, the account structure, the creating the orders, managing it, even doing the acquisition simulation, all of that is not require any code at all, right? So I would say 90% of what you do in the system requires no coding. But if you're going to build new applications, I would say, I don't think we're at the point where like a person can just using words build a new application that's at production grade. You can build a prototype that way, but ultimately you do need to take ownership of the code.
Okay, so we have some clarification on the question. So Brent is saying, can the current broad user base adopt without support, same as you are asking, I guess. So I think you did clarify that you need to have some sort of technical background if you want to develop. In general, the way ERP community is structured, the way companies like to see this, I mean, they are buying an ERP because they don't want to get into all of these custom development, and they might not even have a skill set for that. So I don't know if you have any additional context there.
Exactly. So if someone's doing like some application development, that's where we would do it for them, typically through our own services team, and or work with a services partner that is, more technical. But like I said, 90 something percent of our projects, we are not building new applications for customers, right? We are using the system and applying the configurations, and no one's writing any code.
Okay, perfect. So we have one more question, if you don't mind. So here, Jeff is saying, as a startup, my main diligence question is long-term product stability. If we implement, let's say, Everest, how should we evaluate your likelihood of supporting this platform and roadmap over the next 3 to 5 years? That's a very interesting question. I don't think these guys are going anywhere.
Yeah, I think you want
very well
longevity,
funded.
right,
Yeah.
as a provider, and I think there's longevity comes from a couple different places, right? Longevity comes from, I think, also like how much capital you've raised, and like, do you have substantial capital to last as a company? Are you getting some more substantial customers? And I think we've done that. But also, I think longevity comes from can you handle sophisticated requirements as the startup scales? Because they don't know the requirements they're going to have 18 months, 2 years from now. How could you? No one knows the journey ahead. So I think that's what we've been trying to do all along, is really build for sophisticated business requirements that you can scale with.
Okay, perfect, Jeff. If you have any other questions, follow-up questions, please ask. So we have 2 minutes, Sandeep, whatever you want to cover.
Well, I just wanted to maybe show you a quick preview. So I want to go all the other ways. We talked about that's great, you can build applications, but what about like the bread and butter of ERP, right? And so the bread and butter of ERP, like especially if you're on the order to cash side, is how do you manage customers? How do you do order management, billing, rev rec, and so on? How do you manage through that accounting cycle? So here's an example of an area where we've innovated quite a bit, which is really thoughtfully thinking end to end of the complexities of all these order to cash processes, right? So this is a customer that's got, obviously a recurring revenue model. So things like ARR matter, but also, of course, accounting at the core matters. This is showing you rev rec by different performance obligations for 606, the ARR breakdowns and churn and so on. What I wanted to show you here is the detail though, right? What we're able to do natively is handle all the contract complexities, right? To go from new orders to upsells to new contracts entirely, renewals of those agreements and upsells, right? All the what they call contract modifications and the logic down to billing and rev rec is all built inside the system. So you don't have to, and you, as you scale as a company, you can pass those audits, with ease. So here's an example of one. Here's an example on the order management side of, essentially a classic, this is a software-centric example, but I think people can relate to it. But here's an example of a subscription support and services product with different discounting, right? So you've got the software and the support components that are not discounted, but the services components are. And why this matter is because different discounting triggers different revenue allocation rules per 606. And that's what the revenue contract shows you is all the, and I won't go through all the detailed accounting here, happy to talk afterward, but what is the impact of the contract to the balance sheet? What are the allocations? What are the SSPs? How is the revenue allocated and so on? And the main point I'm trying to make here is all this is being done for you so you can focus on kind of running the business part. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah, so no, this is great. And thank you so much for doing this. And I don't think we can cover everything in 1 hour. Obviously, what you are doing is phenomenal and commendable. And obviously, that is going to require a lot more time to be able to go through. So hopefully we can bring you back. Seems like audience have enjoyed this session. So Sandeep, you have done a wonderful job here. Any sort of closing advice? Do you want to share anything? Any assets that people can download and learn further? I don't know if you have that.
Yeah, we're happy to share some assets afterward, a handful of overview slides and some case studies as well, if that's helpful to customers to see how other people are taking advantage of what we're doing.
Yeah, perfect. And again, I think we are going to be super curious in terms of, what you guys are going to build in the future. This is very exciting. ERP industry overall is at a very inflection point in my mind. These are very interesting changes. So thank you so much for doing this, Sandeep.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sam.
All right.
Thank you.
So that's it for the show, guys. Thank you so much for joining. And again, we'll keep bringing exciting developments from the industry. That's our job, as the podcast host. So again, if you want to be updated about these things, subscribe to our newsletter, follow our page, and follow me on LinkedIn. Once again, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you so much, especially Sandeep.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.